Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Seitson, and I will be talking about the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on dissonance and judgment. So let's first talk about cognitive dissonance. So a researcher named Leon Festinger fostered this theory in 1959, saying that this cognitive dissonance is as a feeling of discomfort when a person's actions contradict their own beliefs. This feeling occurs often in different kinds of scenarios. For example, tobacco smokers continue to smoke despite knowing all the negative consequences of smoking. To counter such discomfort, some people try to make their actions and beliefs more consistent. Regardless of the consequences, tobacco smokers may justify smoking by claiming that smoking is a stress reliever to their daily lives or that it helps them stay thin and not overweight. In a more modern day example, a recent COVID-19 study by Hornick in 2021 shows that of all the participants who claim that they wear a mask and follow social distancing regulations, 83% of people state that they are inconsistent in following the regulations. So even if they have the mask on, if they're wearing it by their chin or hanging it by their ear, those are considered inconsistent. Depending on the issue, cognitive dissonance can have a significant effect enough to disrupt one's decision-making process, or can have an effect insignificant enough to be ignored by one's decision-making process. In this study, we are focusing on how one's decision-making can be influenced by the effects of COVID-19. Since the beginning of COVID-19 pandemic, people have quarantined and social distanced from one another, both of which are just a couple of factors as to how COVID-19 psychologically increased negative emotions and sensitivity to social risk, as well as a decrease in positive emotions. A recent study from Lee and Zhao from 2021 suggests that those who are considered to be very affected by the pandemic are more likely to classify certain activities in areas such as air traveling or large gatherings as more of a high risk for COVID-19 infection than those who are considered mildly or not affected by the pandemic. These judgments for risk are thought to be guided by negative emotions caused by the pandemic itself. A recent study by Chakraborty in 2021 suggests that there has been an increase of social networking activity throughout the pandemic from individuals that rely on social media as a means for psychological coping. As more people spend more time on social media, the likelihood of coming across misinformation on COVID-19 increases. For example, this is a post from the BBC Breaking News saying that Daniel Radcliffe tests positive for coronavirus and that the actor is said to be the first famous person to be publicly confirmed. If you don't know, Daniel Radcliffe is known for his many roles such as being Harry Potter. And although this picture doesn't say it, this post was posted in April, even though in April of 2020, there have already been celebrity confirmations of celebrities being tested positive for coronavirus. So although this is not as major of a misinformation lead, it is still misinformation nonetheless. The spread of misinformation has become a social and political problem, as such misinformation can be the difference between life and death for some people. Another study by Martel and Pennycook in 2020 suggested that those with a higher reliance on their emotions also tend to believe in misinformation. With the pandemic causing emotional processes to be unstable towards negative emotions, it is very likely now more than ever that people are susceptible to misinformation shared via social media. The recent studies support the idea that the pandemic shaped a new dissonance that has increased negative emotions and decreased positive emotions in one's judgment between reasoning and emotion. However, there is no recent research about the effects of a possible new and impacted dissonance caused by the pandemic on judgment and decision making. I want to propose a study that measures this dissonance and the effect it may have on people's perception on COVID-19 misinformation. In this study, I wanted to test the effects of two variables. The first variable being the COVID-19 news type, defined as either true or factual information, or false and misinformation. We added a political preference factor within the first variable to counterbalance into four subgroups, as well as ruling out political preference as a confounding variable. There will also be a control group in which the Twitter post will contain a text with no relevance to political parties and will be either a basic fact or incorrect fact. The second variable being tested will be the dissonance level of the participant. The participant will be placed either as a high dissonance level or as a low dissonance level, based on their average score in their initial questionnaire, which I will get to more into later. Due to the fact that I'm not conducting the experiment, I am unable to determine an internal consistency for the questions, but using a subjective and estimated expectation, I will consider any average score higher than or equal to 4 to be considered high dissonance levels. The dependent variable is the likelihood of credibility, measured via a Likert scale range from 1 to 7, where 1 is considered very unbelievable and 7 considered very believable. Due to high dissonance being caused by more negative emotions and less positive emotions, there is a possible trend for higher dissonance of dissonance participants to produce higher levels of credibility for false news types, considering the possibility of the dissonance having a negative effect on participants from the effects of COVID-19 pandemic. For the participants, we can consider UCLA undergraduate students who enroll and participate via the UCLA psychology subject pool, or the SONA pool, or we can also consider participants that were involved or affected from the COVID-19 pandemic. Using the subject pool will just be easier to collect even more participants and won't force participants to come into an on-campus office and can work on this on their home laptop or computer. So one of the first set of materials is the questionnaire. The questionnaire consists of 16 main questions used to measure the dissonance level of our participants, going in the order of fear, anxiety, anger, and sadness, all which are factors caused from COVID-19. Each question can be read as follows. For fear, quote unquote, COVID-19 makes me feel terrified, and you can end the question there. And each question will ask for a rating between a Likert scale from 1 to 7, meaning 1 being very untrue and 7 being very true. So just to reiterate, greater than or equal to score of 4 is considered a high overall average dissonance score, whereas anything less than 4 is considered a low overall average dissonance score. We are using the discrete emotions questionnaire developed by Cindy and Eddie Harmon Jones in 2016. However, these specific set of questions were inspired by the Lee and Zhao study mentioned earlier, as these are the same exact, if not very similar questions made from their study. So the materials for our experiment consist of 50 different sets of different stimuli, operationalized as fake or manipulated tweets. We will have 10 tweets per group, split in between the 4 counterpoints grouped on the first variable of either political party or type of news information. Each subgroup will be counterbalanced to have all possible outcomes. Each Twitter post consists of either a true or false claim that was manipulated or copied from someone who is affiliated from their respective political parties. On the top left, you can see the respective political parties of the Democrats showing true statements. On the bottom of that is the same side of the Democrats, but with a false statement. And then vice versa, on the other side, on the top right would be Republican-leaning true statements, and on the bottom right will be Republican-leaning false statements. We also have a control group that will consist of another 10 Twitter posts that are not politically favored and will be presented as either a simple true or false statement not about COVID-19. The procedures for our experiment goes as follows. Once entered through the UCLA SONA pool, participants will be given a questionnaire to assess their demographics and dissonance level. Demographics can include the simple facts of race, sex, age, school year, but most important, political preference. Secondly, participants are given the following instructions. In this experiment, you will be presented with a random selection of Twitter posts that are related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Rate each Twitter post from 1 being very unbelievable to 7 being very believable in terms of credibility. Press enter when finished to continue on to the next post. An example shown here is the same example shown on the previous slide. This is the Democratic false statement reading, the sad fact is that COVID-19 is contributing to climate catastrophes here at the home and around the world. Below it we will ask to rate each Twitter post from 1 being very unbelievable to 7 being very believable in terms of credibility, below of which the participant can select which answer they believe best fits this statement. Possible outcomes for this experiment will be generated from a 2-sample t-test, since we're comparing 2 different populations here. The first outcome is consistent with the hypothesis, saying that the higher level of dissonance will produce higher credibility for false news types. This is just being consistent with the hypothesis that negative emotions from the pandemic will probably have a big influence on being able to find higher credibility from false news types. The second outcome is the exact opposite, just higher levels of dissonance will produce higher credibility for true news types. This is just going on the fact that most participants, based on this study, will be going off the UCLA subject pool from the SONA system, where, as we are all aware, the UCLA majority population is more liberal / left / Democratic Party favored. So they are more than likely going to identify Democratic favored posts rather than Republican favored posts. The last outcome is that there will be no significant results, and the level of dissonance has no effect on credibility for news type at all. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. I hope you guys all have a very beautiful day. All right, and thank you so much. Have a good one.